You were told he was watching, always, in the silence of your room, in the hidden corners of your thoughts, in the guilt that clung to your skin like fog. You were told he loved you, but only if you obeyed, only if you believed, only if you were good. So you prayed, to an image carved in fear, to a presence that felt more like a judge than a father, more like a warden than a savior. And if you ever doubted, you were told it was your fault. That faith demanded blindness. That questioning was sin. That silence was proof of his mystery, not his absence. But somewhere beneath the ritual and the reverence, a voice began to whisper. A small, unnerving thought. What if the God I believe in doesn't exist? Not that there is no God, but that this God, the angry one, the jealous one, the punisher in the sky, might not be God at all. Maybe he's something else, something older, something deeper, a shadow cast by the human mind, a reflection of fear, not of truth. Carl Jung once said, "The gods have become diseases. Zeus no longer rules Olympus, but rather the solar plexus, and produces curious symptoms. For the doctor, what if God is not above, but within? What if our search for the divine has never been upward, but inward, into the depths of our own unconscious?" This isn't blasphemy. This is confrontation with the architecture of belief, with the illusions we inherit, with the psychic ghosts we worship. Because before we can know God, we must first understand the mind that imagined him. Carl Jung never claimed God was a lie. He claimed something far more unsettling, that God is real, but not in the way we think, not a man in the sky, not a cosmic king with a list of rules, but a presence, a force, a symbol so ancient and so universal. It seems to rise from within the human psyche itself, across cultures and centuries. People who never met, who never read the same books, still dreamed of gods, still painted heavens and hells, still told stories of creation, judgment, redemption. Why? Jung believed the answer lived in the collective unconscious, a deep psychic reservoir that all human beings share. Beneath our personal memories and experiences lie the same primal patterns, the same archetypes, and the God archetype is the most powerful of them all. It is the symbol of totality, of unity, of what we long for in our most broken moments. Order in chaos, purpose in suffering, meaning in mortality. But here's the truth Jung revealed. We don't just believe in God, we project him. The God of our childhood fears, the God of punishment and reward, of wrath and mercy, is often a mirror. Not of some divine truth, but of our deepest inner needs, for safety, for justice, for control. And just as dreams speak in symbols, so does our unconscious. It doesn't care about theology. It speaks in myths. God becomes the ultimate metaphor, for the self fully realized, for the union of opposites within us, for the final integration of shadow and light. This doesn't mean God is only a human invention. It means our experience of God is shaped by the architecture of our own minds. Jung wrote, "It is psychologically quite correct to say, I believe in God, or I do not believe in God. But it is not correct to say, God exists, or God does not exist. Whoever says that does not know what he is talking about." For Jung, the existence of God was less important than the fact that humans are compelled to believe in one. That urge comes from somewhere. It's not logic, it's not culture, it's something deeper, a symbol that erupts from the depths of the unconscious and takes the shape of gods, prophets, scriptures, and prayers. And if we ignore that, if we treat God only as myth or superstition, we risk severing ourselves from the very roots of the human psyche. Jung didn't try to prove or disprove God. He tried to map the terrain of the human soul that needs God to exist. Because whether or not there is a God in the heavens, there is certainly one in the mind. And that one we can't afford to ignore. We like to think we see the world clearly, that what we believe is true because it reflects reality. But more often, it reflects us. In psychology, there's a mechanism called projection, where the mind takes what it can't handle and hurls it outward. Unacknowledged fear becomes a threat out there. Unseen rage becomes the enemy. Unconscious desires turn into temptation, demons, or sin. Carl Jung believed projection was central to how we construct God, that our concept of the divine is not a revelation, but a reflection. We project our hopes. We project our guilt. We project our need for someone to take control when we feel helpless in the face of life. The wrathful God of storms and fire. Maybe that was our fear of nature. The jealous God of ancient scriptures. Maybe that was our fear of betrayal, of chaos in the tribe. The all-loving Savior. Maybe that was our yearning to be forgiven for what we can't forgive in ourselves. The gods we imagine carry our emotional. They are us, but magnified, exaggerated, sanctified. And when we forget that, when we treat these projections as external truths, we stop seeing ourselves. We start worshiping our own unconscious fears, calling them holy, building temples to them. Sometimes those projections give us comfort. Other times, they give us war, because it doesn't stop with religion. We project onto ideologies, onto political leaders, onto celebrities, gurus, enemies, and heroes. We turn ordinary humans into gods and devils because we haven't met our own inner God or faced our own inner devil. A nation becomes sacred. A party becomes righteous. A cause becomes unquestionable. And suddenly we're burning witches again, just with different labels. Jung warned that the less we know about our own psyche, the more we are manipulated by it, that what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves will rule our lives from the shadows. If you don't see your inner anger, you'll see an angry God. If you can't face your need for control, you'll find a controlling deity. And if you're terrified of chaos, you'll worship a God who promises rigid order, even if it costs you your freedom. What we call divine might just be our own reflection, echoing back from the depths of the unconscious. And the real danger is believing that it's not. We all carry a darkness, not evil necessarily, but unknown, the things we deny, the things we repress, the parts of ourselves we hide from the world, and even more deeply, from ourselves. Carl Jung called this the shadow. It's not just anger, violence, envy, or lust. It's also vulnerability, weakness. Everything we've been taught is unacceptable, unworthy, unholy. So we bury it. We pretend it's not there. And then we see it. Everywhere. In other people. In cultures we don't understand. In enemies. We dehumanize. In the devil, the shadow, Jung said, isn't the opposite of God. It is part of the self, part of what we are. But when we can't face it inside, we cast it outside, onto monsters, demons, sinners, and scapegoats. We call it evil, and then we go to war with it. Look at history, witch hunts, holy wars, the Inquisition, genocides committed in the name of righteousness, not driven by true evil, but by people who believed they were fighting evil. This is the danger of a disowned shadow. It doesn't go away. It festers. And the more we deny it, the more power it gains. We build religions where the devil is everywhere but inside us. We preach morality while hiding addiction, shame, and cruelty. We punish others for the very impulses we've never dared to acknowledge. And when someone threatens to expose that truth, they become the villain. Jung warned, the person who denies their shadow becomes possessed by it. Think about that. The person who denies their capacity for darkness becomes a puppet to it. They rationalize cruelty. They inflict pain in the name of purity. They see themselves as instruments of God, but act more like agents of repression. Facing the shadow isn't comfortable. It never is. But without that confrontation, there's no freedom, no growth, no real spirituality. Because God, if he means anything, cannot just be light. He must also contain the dark, not evil, but wholeness. And that means we have to stop pretending we are only light. The devil isn't beneath us. He's behind our smile, in our silence, in the thought we refuse to think. And until we dare to look him in the eye, We will keep calling our violence divine. At first, religion was a whisper, a murmur around firelight, stories passed down to make sense of the stars, the seasons, the dead. It was mystical, personal, intimate. But over time, the whisper became a voice, and then a command. Because once, people began projecting power onto the divine. Others learned to claim it. This is where God stopped being a mystery and started becoming an institution. It didn't take long. Gods turned into laws, prophets turned into kings, faith became hierarchy, and fear became a weapon. The Roman Empire didn't conquer Christianity. It absorbed it, tamed it, used it. The same Christ who preached love, forgiveness, and humility was soon draped in gold, carried into war, and used to justify execution, conquest, and colonization. This wasn't God. It was the idea of God, twisted into control. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He wrote that when symbols lose their inner power, they become political tools, empty shells, used not to guide souls, but to govern bodies. Faith becomes dogma, spirituality becomes obedience, and those who question, heretics, enemies of the divine order. Look through history, and you'll see this pattern repeating like a drumbeat. The Crusades, the burning of heretics, the forced conversions, the divine right of kings, the church deciding who lives, who dies, who speaks, and all of it done in the name of God. But it wasn't God speaking, it was the ego, the unintegrated shadow, the terrified need to control the chaos of the world by pretending to know what only mystery understands. When people stop connecting with the divine within, they become vulnerable to those who claim to represent it from above, and those who represent inevitably begin to shape God in their image, a God who punishes doubt, a God who fears questions, a God who demands loyalty not to truth, but to authority. In the medieval church, salvation came through obedience, not introspection, not transformation, but submission to a system. Carl Jung saw this as a profound psychological shift. God was no longer an inward experience. He was externalized, politicized, weaponized. And when that happens, the human psyche suffers, because the archetype of God is meant to unite the self, not fracture it. When religion becomes empire, God becomes a tool for division, a reason to split the world into chosen and damned, saved and lost, clean and unclean. And yet, beneath every cathedral of power, beneath every holy war, beneath every law wrapped in divine language, there is still the original question. What are we trying to control? What part of the human soul are we trying to silence? The truth is uncomfortable. Many of the gods we worship are just shadows in disguise, projections of our desire for order, for certainty, for the illusion that someone, somewhere, is in charge. And those in charge, those who claim to speak for God, they know this. They know fear is easier to manage than faith, that obedience is easier to demand than understanding, that a frightened mind will kneel before almost anything if you call it sacred. This isn't just history, it's happening now in politics, in cults of personality, in ideologies disguised as salvation. Whenever someone says, "You must believe this or else," you are no longer dealing with God. You are dealing with power. Jung didn't want to destroy religion. He wanted to return it to its roots, as symbol, as a path inward, not a tool for domination. Because when God becomes empire, he no longer liberates the soul. He imprisons it. We think we've outgrown gods, that we're modern now, secular, rational. We laugh at the myths of Olympus. We dissect the scriptures of ancient faiths. We build museums out of temples. But the truth is, we haven't stopped worshiping. We've just changed what we call sacred. The old gods wore robes and thunder. The new gods wear suits, logos, flags, hashtags. Carl Jung warned that when religious symbols lose their psychological power, they don't disappear. They mutate. We don't stop projecting. We just aim the projection elsewhere. We make gods out of ideologies, out of identities, out of systems of belief that promise us purpose, morality, and belonging. but with a cost: absolute loyalty, unquestioning devotion. The sacrifice of doubt: left, right, capitalism, communism, science, progress, nation, tribe, race, gender. Each one, a framework for meaning. Each one, a new kind of mythology. Now we speak in the tongues of ideology. We battle over narratives. We banish heretics. We anoint saints and sinners, not based on truth, but on allegiance. Modern gods don't live in the sky. They live in our headlines, in algorithms that decide what you see, in curated identities, where branding becomes belief. And just like old religions, modern ideologies promise salvation, if you just follow the rules. Believe the right things, use the right words, hate the right enemies. What we're worshiping isn't truth. It's certainty, a sacred lie we tell ourselves. That we're not projecting anymore, that this time we've finally found the real thing. But Jung would say, no. You've only swapped the symbols. You've traded one God image for another. And as long as you don't confront your own unconscious, your own fears, needs, and shadows, you'll keep mistaking your reflection for revelation. That's how propaganda works. That's how cults grow. That's how entire societies become possessed by myths they no longer recognize as myths. You want to see how deep it goes? Look at how people respond to criticism of their beliefs, not with thought, but with rage, with panic, with silence. That's not reason. That's religion. We've digitized the sacred, turned tribalism into timelines, turned ideology into identity. Now, to challenge someone's worldview is to attack their self. It's not a debate, it's a holy war. But if your belief system can't survive being questioned, maybe it's not belief, maybe it's fear in disguise. Jung believed that only by reclaiming our inner symbols, our dreams, our myths, our archetypes, could we stop falling prey to external ones. The danger isn't belief, it's unconscious belief, unexamined conviction, the kind that comes not from truth, but from the need to silence your own chaos. Because if you don't deal with your own inner fragmentation, you'll need the world to be divided for you. Heroes and villains, us and them, saved and damned, and just like that, you're worshiping a god again. Only now he speaks through your favorite news anchor. He tweets, he lectures, he punishes. The gods have changed clothes, but they've never left. After all this, the projections, the shadow, the history, the ideology, you might ask, so what's left? If the God I believe in doesn't exist, does any God? Carl Jung never gave a final answer. He didn't tell you what to believe. He asked, what does your belief do to you? Does it free you? Or does it bind you? Does it make you whole? Or does it divide you further? He believed that even if we can't know whether God exists in the sky, we can know that something divine exists within. He called it the self, not the ego, not the personality, but the totality of your being, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, wounds and wisdom. The self is what you were before you learned who to be. It's what watches when your thoughts are loud. It's the stillness beneath the noise. Jung said that God is not an object. He's not a conclusion. He's a process, a symbol of the inner journey, from fragmentation to integration, from chaos to wholeness. Not the kind of wholeness sold by self-help books, not positive affirmations or spiritual bypassing, but the kind that comes when you face the darkest parts of yourself and make peace with them. The God that might be real is the one found when you descend, not ascend when you enter the cave. Face the demon. Realize the demon was your reflection, and the light was behind you the whole time. This isn't theology. It's transformation. Because if God is anything, he's not just something you believe in. He's something you become, not as an almighty being, but as a unified one. Jung wrote, "You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become." So ask yourself, do your beliefs bring you closer to that? Or further, have they become a wall between you and reality? A mask to avoid the truth? A script you follow to avoid writing your own? The God that might be real is not the one who answers prayers like a cosmic vending machine. Not the one who needs worship, allegiance, or purity, but the one who appears when you strip it all away, when there's no one left to impress, when there's no audience, when there's just you, and the part of you you've spent your whole life avoiding. The sacred isn't always light. Sometimes it's terrifying, because it asks everything from you. The God that might be real doesn't save you from the fire. He walks you through it, and on the other side, you're not who you were. More than belief, more than ritual, more than ideology. You become something else. Not someone who has faith, but someone who embodies it. That kind of God isn't threatened by doubt. He requires it. Because real spirituality begins not with answers, but with questions we're afraid to ask. So, after everything, the projections, the shadow, the myths, the empires, the ideologies, we arrive at the question, does God exist? Maybe not the one you were taught to believe in, not the cosmic parent in the clouds, not the angry judge in ancient texts, not the political tool, the weaponized morality, the face of fear disguised as faith. That God probably never existed, but something else does, something that speaks in symbols, in dreams, in silence, in moments when your defenses fall away and all that's left is presence. Jung never claimed to know the real God, but he saw what belief does to us, how it can heal or divide, awaken or enslave. He saw that whatever God is, it cannot be separated from your own psyche. It emerges from within, not from above. And here's the paradox. The God you outgrow was never really God. He was a story you needed, until you didn't. But the God you find within, beneath the ruins of those stories, isn't an answer. He's a mirror, not a being, but a becoming. So maybe the real question isn't whether God exists, but whether you are willing to meet whatever waits on the other side of your certainty. Because the moment you let go of the God you think is real, is the moment something deeper has room to emerge. Not belief, not dogma, but direct experience, the quiet awe of being alive, the sacred terror of confronting your shadow, the mysterious order that seems to pulse beneath the chaos of your life. Maybe that's God, not as a character in the sky, but as the symbol of your wholeness, and that God doesn't need worship, only honesty. So here we are, at the end of the story, or maybe the beginning of your own. The God you believe in doesn't exist, but the one waiting to be discovered. In silence, in suffering, and truth just might.